Enough! You want
Overwatch.
It's yours.
Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. You can't
Nerf.
beat me.
No, I know. But he can.
No!
The Horse is one of the most controversial heroes in Overwatch. Period. A heavily contested title, but one she has fought for bravely. Few if any people will try to argue with you about how awful it is to fight this horse. Simultaneously, and unlike most other heroes, very few if any people would even try to tell you a reason why she's fun to play. And I consider that a tragedy. Orisa falls under the category of what I like to call hostage heroes. Characters with fundamental design flaws that are entirely intended by the developers with zero signs of an intention to actually address them. They tend to call these hero fantasies. As a result, these heroes constantly find themselves in one of two scenarios. A, they are too strong, leading to them showing up in most if not all matches across all ranks, which in turn makes their flaws painfully clear to everybody that's forced to play as them or against them, resulting in a significant reduction of the average player's enjoyment of the game. Or B, they have to be gutted to hell and back to make them nearly unpickable so the least amount of people possible have to deal with their flawed, unfun design. Orisa in the last half of Season 9 and the first 2 weeks of Season 10 was in the first category. So much better than everybody else that she was a must pick or else you'd be sure to lose. At least in most cases. This led to people praying for her downfall. Again, since it's not the first time this has happened to her. And sure enough, the devs delivered, nerfing her to the ground, killing her viability, and the little fun her players could get out of her alongside it. And the collective Overwatch player base let out a sigh of relief that day. Until they looked at the DPS passive, but that's a kind of words for another day. This is a sad reality that poor hero design causes, where the line between overpowered and unplayable is too thin and developers must choose how happy they can let a certain character's mains be, since letting them be even just a tad too happy leads to everybody else enjoying the game less, as well as themselves, since let's not pretend a poorly designed mirror match is fun. But how does the horse happen? How do you assign a character that's almost universally disliked, especially coming off of a rework that was trying to make her less of a problem? And perhaps most importantly, how do you fix it? Can you fix it? Should you fix it at all? Well, in terms of whether you should or not, I believe the answer is yes. Even though nobody likes Orisa, the playable hero, otherwise known simply as the horse, Orisa, the fictional character, is actually really likable. Characters in Overwatch mean more to the player than just their kit. In many ways, the kit and the character are meant to be complementary extensions of one another. I started playing characters like Torbjorn or Bastion because they were simple enough for me to wrap my head around, but I fell in love with them because of the character behind the kit. I started playing Reinhardt because his character is just awesome, and ultimately fell in love with his kit as well. It reflects him perfectly, and I hope to talk about that in another video. I believe Orisa players deserve to have a version of their character that they can enjoy and have her be good competitively without having to make everybody roll their eyes at best and want to eat glass at worst. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to ask for either. As for whether you can fix her, Orisa's design has been a problem for as long as she's existed. The developers have never once sat down to address the fundamental issues with it, instead opting to tune numbers up and down hoping it will somehow work out. Even when she was reworked for Overwatch 2, they still didn't change the core issues that plague the character's design. What I'm trying to say is that Orisa has never once been given a fair shot to be a good, healthy, and enjoyable character. And I think she can be, but she needs a lot of work. To put it bluntly, she needs another rework. And one that actually addresses the problem this time. As for how you do that, well, to understand how to make Orisa better, we first have to understand what makes the horse bad in the first place.
Leave me alone!
Okay, so you're gonna have to horse with me for a moment. But to understand what truly makes the horse such a horrible design, I must first explain to you what makes something feel good, or enjoyable. It's all in this little formula right here. A stimulus leads to a response, leads to a reinforcement or a punishment. A stimulus is anything that triggers a response. A response is any action, including deliberate inaction. A reinforcement is a stimulus that triggers a reward response from your brain. You might be familiar with the medical feel-good juice your brain makes. I like to call it fuck because my brain produces fuck whenever I say it like that. A punishment is a stimulus that does the opposite of that, discouraging you from doing it again. For simplicity, let's say it produces womp. and womp makes you feel bad. Things that give you fuck feel good, things that don't give you fuck don't, and things that give you womp feel bad. When you hit a player, you get a satisfying sound as a reward, which in turn gives you fuck. When you get a critical hit, you get a distinct, even more satisfying sound, which grants you even more fuck. When you get an elimination, you get another distinct, even more satisfying sound, which grants you the most amount of fuck out of them all. This is called positive reinforcement, or reinforcing true rewards. Getting hit does the opposite, giving you womp. Dying, womp womp. This is called positive punishment, or punishing through, well, punishment. Whenever you're in a fight, you're constantly hitting and being hit. However, if you ultimately come out ahead, you'll stop getting hit, or in other words, you make the punishment disappear. This is a negative reinforcement, where the reward is the disappearance of a punishment. When you're in a fight and your opponent suddenly escapes or gets life ripped away, you logically become upset, because even though you're no longer being hit, you have now been deprived of access to the fuck you still could have gotten. This is a negative punishment, or punishing by taking away the reinforcement. Fun fact, negative punishment is believed to be the least effective and most frustrating form of teaching, and it's also a type of punishment used in prisons. I know that was a giant mouthful, but it is important terminology to understand for the rest of the video. Now then, we can finally talk about the horse. It's important to understand as a baseline that I will be talking exclusively about the horse design, not its balance. A well-designed character only feels bad when put up against a poorly designed character. Case in point, Reinhardt, even at his lowest, is still a fun character to play and play against. His core design makes that be so. And if you think about the reasons people have to not enjoy Reinhardt, you'll likely see example after example of poor design choices, be it character-wise or game-wise. Lastly, and I swear I'll actually get to the damn horse, format does not factor in this whatsoever. Fundamental design flaws exist in any format and can be made better or worse by a format change, but not removed or created. Do note that a format change can screw over or break characters, but in itself, it does not alter the quality of their design, only how effective it is. Okay, I'm gonna go over Orisa's entire kit, and if you've been paying attention, you might be able to see the problems before I say anything more. Orisa is a tank character, which grants her a passive to reduce incoming knockback by 30%, but also makes her generate 30% less ult from being damaged or healed. Her primary fire is a projectile-based weapon with no fall-off, gravity, or ammunition, trading the latter for a hit system. Her secondary fire, or first ability, is the Energy Javelin, a projectile with no fall-off or gravity that will stagger any enemy hit and disposition them. If the spear pins the enemy against a wall, it will deal additional damage and extend the stagger duration slightly. Her second ability is Fortify, which will grant her overhealth, increased damage reduction, reduced heat generation, and complete critical hit, stun, and knockback immunity for the duration of the ability. Her third and last ability is Javelin Spin. She will spin her javelin in front of her for a short duration. While it spins, it has an active hitbox able to hit enemies repeatedly, push them away slightly, block almost any physical attack, and destroy almost any projectile that touches it. Additionally, she gains a speed bonus while moving forward. Her ultimate is Terra Surge, where she'll pull enemies towards her and start charging up an attack. You can let go of the charge at any moment. This will release a hit with damage proportional to the amount charged. Additionally, she will have Fortify activated for the duration of the skill. Okay, let's save some time on this video for once. Fusion Driver having zero fall-off is stupid, and it encourages horse players to stay at a safe range for eternity while also making it so you can give it more damage or it will become extremely overpowered as there's no such thing as being in a safe range away from it. Energy Javelin is a stagger, which I do separate from a stun, but it's still one of the worst properties you can give any ability, as it's still removing the player's ability to play the game entirely, even if for only a brief period of time. Javelin Spin does way too much at once while also being offensively useless, effectively turning it into another way for the horse to live forever and little more, with that little more adding insult to injury. Terra Surge is just boring, and not very threatening for an ultimate, but the real issue with it is that it activates Fortify for the duration of it. Speaking of, Fortify is the core issue I've been alluding to this entire time, and the ability that I firmly believe is holding Orisa's balance hostage. And if you heard me list the properties it has, it should be apparent why. Overhealth, damage reduction, reduced heat generation. By themselves, these would already make a strong ability, but of course, there's the part that pushes it over the edge. Complete critical hit, stun, or knockback immunity for the duration of the ability. Okay, so immunities are bad. They're extremely hard to balance and they always feel terrible for the other end, since you're not partially but entirely shutting down something. It falls in the same category as an antibiotic grenade, where the effect is a 100% reduction, and that's not a good idea on a cooldown. The developer said that Anna's grenade was keeping healing in check a few seasons ago, an open admission that healing was a problem and the grenade was their heavy-handed solution to it, which is an unhealthy way of addressing the problem. If something is too strong, so your solution is to create something else that's too strong to counteract it, you don't stop having a problem, you now have two separate problems that coexist at once, and one of them becomes manageable only if both are present. Now, if there isn't something too strong to the point that it demands heavy-handed countermeasures, then why in God's green earth would you ever do a 100% reduction on a cooldown? Anna's Grenade is a more complicated ability that you can make a genuine case for having been handled well, in spite of its horrific full denial nature. But Fortify is in Biotic Grenade, and it has 3 full denials, not just one, all while having no counterplay, downsides before the last patch, or any way for the enemy to do anything other than wait until it runs out or brute force through it to kill the horse. It encourages and reinforces an overly defensive playstyle from the horse player that everybody on the enemy team has to suffer through. You attack the horse from a range? Positive punishment. Try to get close? Positive punishment. Use your ult? No you didn't, negative punishment. Horse is close to a ledge? No she's not, negative punishment. Horse is low on health? Not for long, negative punishment. Her entire kit is about taking away the enemy's ability to get value. It's about denial, it's about shutting down, and it's about stopping them from having fun. A hero can stop another hero's fun by virtue of how they work sometimes. That's the nature of counterswapping, an inevitable result of hero diversity. But when the entirety of the hero's design is about preventing the enemy from enjoying the match, it shouldn't be a surprise that almost nobody likes them, even their own players. But like I said, just because even the developers don't like them, that doesn't mean Orisa enjoyers don't deserve a good hero. So how do you make a good version of Orisa anyways? Thankfully we don't need to think too hard about that, because the developers did already. You take Orisa from Overwatch 1, a much healthier starting point, you give her less armor, you make her primary fire weaker but so fast it's effectively hitscan, you make her shield smaller and shorter duration as well as spawning immediately so she can't air stall it, you make holding to a slow that deals damage, which is boring but quite effective, and lastly you remove all of Fortify's immunities. You make it increase her moving speed, transform her primary fire into a melee attack, and you make it so she only gets increased damage reduction if she holds a button, and doing so stops her from firing. Congratulations, you have taken Orisa's design from unhealthy and boring to Ramattra. It's literally just Ramattra.
You took everything from me.
For what it's worth, I am sorry.
Ramattra is everything Overwatch 1 Orisa wishes she would have been. A poke hero with a shield to protect themselves and allies, a crowd control ability, though let's face it, Hold is cooler and more fun, and an ability that turns them into a genuine threat to the enemy team for a couple of seconds, without any immunities to make them unbearable to fight. Ramattra is a perfected version of Overwatch 1 Orisa, even addressing one of her toughest design problems being that as a poke tank, she should be countered by dive, but thanks to Fortify, she was able to deal with this weakness just fine, since she could basically just brawl the divers to death. A problem which only got aggravated by other heroes released after her to create the wonderful thing we now remember as Double Shield. Ramattra, despite his ability to poke, is a brawl tank, a comp style that counters dive, making his nemesis form not a conflicting design choice but a perfectly fitting one, all while also tackling all the problems Fortify had. It has no immunities, so enemy players don't feel completely helpless while being run down by a Ramattra. It turns his primary fire into a pummel, which means he's forced to get up close to get value rather than staying at a safe distance. It increases his movement speed, encouraging an offensive playstyle over a defensive one, while also aiding him with his need to approach. And lastly, instead of having free damage reduction through the whole duration of the ability, Ramattra has block, which would reduce more damage taken, but it stops him from performing any other action besides moving while he's using it, meaning Ramattra must make a choice to either be threatening or survive, something Fortify doesn't make Orisa do. Additionally, while blocking, Ramattra is slowed down, even below his regular form speed, which means he can't chase you while being safe at the same time. And most importantly of all, he isn't completely safe. He is still vulnerable to headshots, critical hits, and only gets damage reduction when attacked from the front, meaning enemy players can take an angle to get full damage even when he's blocking. Compare everything that I just said to a developer's solution in the latest patch of just making the ability shorter and having Orisa always slowed down for as long as it is active. All of the problems are still the same. There is no choice, and now the ability feels worse for the players to use while also being just as frustrating for the enemy as it was before, for as long as it is active. Yikes. Ramattra proves that Overwatch upon Orisa could have worked if she had been reworked properly. Hell, if Ramattra and Orisa had switched places, double shield wouldn't have even happened. 2 shields aren't enough without Fortify, and Ramattra is a brawler, meaning he'd be handicapped by being forced to bunker even if his shield was overtuned, all while also being a great answer to bunker strategies himself. But if Ramattra already exists, then there's no point in making Orisa another Ramattra, right? Well, yeah. It would be redundant to make Ramattra twice, but he is still a great character to draw inspiration from. Ramattra took a design that wasn't healthy or fun for either side and made it highly engaging for both sides while keeping it healthy. So how can we do the same again while keeping it distinct enough?
Always remember, never accept the
Orisa.
as it appears to be. Dare to see
Orisa.
for what it could be.
To redesign a character, we have to set goals about what we want to achieve. That way we can somewhat measure the success of the new design, even if it's only hypothetical. Obviously, we have to make sure those goals make sense in the first place. Excuse me, where was I? Right, goals. Orisa 3.0 must be healthy for the greater game, so no vulnerabilities, engaging for the player, so more than a sitting duck simulator, minimally frustrating with as few negative punishments as you can reasonably have, and, perhaps most importantly of all, must still be Orisa. This one will be up to interpretation, but I think I got it. Alright, with the goal set in place, here is my pitch for Orisa 3.0. Her primary fire will stay the same, but it will have fall-off starting at mid-range and harsher fall-off at long range. Her secondary fire will now be Javelin Spin. It will no longer have a duration or a cooldown, instead it will generate heat. Holding the ability will generate a small amount of heat and reduce knockback taken by a sizable amount. Moving forward will increase the heat generation and still grant a speed boost. Moving backwards will grant a speed penalty. Blocking projectiles or melee attacks will generate heat based on how much damage was absorbed. Eating an ultimate, like Captive Stun or Graviton Surge, will generate a set amount of heat to account for their lack of damage relative to the value lost upon being eaten. The ability can still be used to nudge enemies around, but it will no longer deal damage on contact, and it will act as a wall on impact with abilities like Doom Punch or Rhine Charge. Overheating will cause Orisa to be unable to shoot or use Javelin Spin for a few seconds. Her first ability will be Halt. No further changes here. Her second ability will be Energy Javelin. It will no longer stagger enemies, it will now gain the ability to pierce through multiple targets, but not through barriers. Its knockback will be reduced slightly and is now only there for the sake of impact, having no movement lockout on it. Finally, her ultimate is now supercharged. Orisa will turn gold and her drum will begin to glow for the duration of the ultimate. Fusion Driver's short-range damage will increase. Heat generation from all sources will be decreased. Her entire health pool will turn to armor, excluding any health given to her by other players. Any stun or movement lock's duration will be reduced. It does not stack with any other reduction. Javelin Spin will be able to stop Maga's overrun, resulting in a mutual knockdown. Finally, the big one, Orisa's critical hit spot will be moved from her head to the size of her drum. Her drum will have a separate HP bar similar to a shield, which takes damage simultaneously if she receives a critical hit. This HP will also slowly deplete by itself and it cannot be regenerated or extended by any means. The ultimate ends when either the drum reaches 0 HP or Orisa dies. Alright, so some things need explanation. Fusion Driver having fall off is a necessity. Orisa needs to have a reason to get close regardless of how good her aim is, and fall off is the easiest way to do that. It also means her gun can be more than a pea shooter without being inherently broken due to its range and lack of gravity. I even thought about making her hit scan, but it felt weird. Taking away the cooldown and duration from Javelin Spin is risky, I'll admit, but most of the problems with Javelin Spin come from it being part of Orisa's cooldown rotation, and contributing to her nigh immortality, more than from the ability itself, which is just a very angry defense matrix. I took away its ability to do damage and put it on the hit system so that Orisa is forced to make a choice between protecting herself with Javelin Spin or putting out pressure with Fusion Driver. She also generates extra heat when moving forward, so she can charge in without a care in the world. Attacks generate heat based on the damage absorbed to ensure that resource management is dynamic and not just a flat hit counter. And ultimates provide more heat so you can't just eat them for free. Obviously, how much heat exactly everything generates is a matter of balance. The general idea is that a good Orisa should know how to best manage her hit generation in every fight, allowing for skill expression through resource management and risk assessment, while also giving enemy players a way to crack through the Orisa, as she must generate heat to defend herself and will become almost completely defenseless if overheated. Halt is just a fun ability to use. It improves the Orisa's enjoyment, it allows for more team play, and it's significantly less frustrating to fight than just about every other ability Orisa has ever had. Additionally, it's an ability that does no damage, which contributes to the pseudo-pacifist design Orisa should have. Energy Javelin is a necessary evil to help Orisa's firepower, so I took away the staggering and replaced it with piercing. The basic idea being that Orisa can use it to finish off a low-health enemy through a skill shot, or otherwise shoot it at enemies caught in hold to get a good chunk of damage. The knockback is only there so the move feels like it has impact and should not be strong at all. Finally, Supercharged. I was originally going to make her ultimate supercharged again, but I realized that adding another source of damage increase to the game might not be a great idea, regardless of how it's handled. So, after I was done making the rest of the kit and realized that I had managed to get rid of Fortify entirely, I decided to make it the ultimate. Or rather, have some of the ideas I had thought of for Fortify as the ultimate. She still turns into her iconic gold form, but now the supercharger in her back will start glowing, indicating it is now her new weak spot, specifically the sides of it. So that way the rest of the changes aren't too overwhelming, hopefully. Her entire health pool turns to armor and armor damage reduction is increased. The first part is just for consistency. I hate how the horse stacks armor damage reduction on top of Fortify damage reduction, and it's just a 5% increase over Fortify alone, and that's lost when she runs out of armor. It's just weird, so instead of having two sources of damage reduction stacking, she now has only one, her armor, but it will become all of her health so it stays consistent for the duration of it. The second part wasn't planned, but thanks to the latest devlog, I feel the need to add it as a way to get my intended design back on track. Thanks, Aaron. Honestly, just imagine Orisa has a personal passive that makes her armor 30% damage reduction instead of 5 flat, and Fortify increases that to whatever amount turns out to be fair. But that's balancing, we're not here to talk numbers. Side note, I hate the latest tank changes. They literally go against everything I preach in this video, but oh well. And as another side note, that I realized after writing the entire script, the armor changes might actually be better for Orisa than I originally gave them credit for, but for the sake of not spending longer on this than I already have, I have decided to just keep it the way it already is, with a percent damage reduction instead of a flat amount per bullet. Reducing the duration of stuns is a way to make it so there's still value in stunning her, especially given this form is on a timer, but that value is diminished, not removed entirely. Oh, and just because it occurred to me this late into the script, and I think it should be fair, she also can't lose heat while stunned specifically. Other forms of crowd control won't affect heat. Flogging Maga's overrun with Javelin Spin is honestly just a flavorful interaction, as the immovable object meets the unstoppable force, and they both fall to the ground as a result, with Orisa getting up slightly faster, of course. The drum having its own HP is my way to most fairly approach the ability's duration. It will tick down constantly, meaning it will run out. However, Orisa and or her teammates can protect the drum to maximize the duration of it. Meanwhile, enemy players can attack the drum to decrease it, with any hit taken being irreparable as well as doing critical damage to Orisa too. And now the drum's damage taken is not affected by any form of damage reduction or damage taken increase effective on Orisa, meaning it works like a shield, so a mercy or nano damage boost will still work. And that's it. That's my new and improved hypothetical Orisa. But does it really live up to the goals I set? Well, let's see. Is this Orisa more fun to play than the last one? Well, this one is in a high bar, but I still think I did well. Her new set of abilities should give her plenty of options to make plays, and those plays require decision making and risk assessment, which all contributes to a greater skill expression. I will admit though, I'm not entirely satisfied, mainly with the fact that the way a good chunk of said skill expression is rewarded is by not overheating, which in reality is more like a punishment if you mess up. But overall, I still consider it a success, if I do say so myself. Is this Orisa more engaging for the enemy? Absolutely. Removing invulnerabilities alone could have done that, but every single ability has weaknesses that the enemy can use to their advantage, encouraging them to try and take her down for the sweet fuck. Not to mention, I basically removed Fortify as an ability altogether, so yeah, I'm pretty confident on this department. Does this playable character reflect Orisa's characterization? Yes and no. Unfortunately, Orisa's pacifist nature demands her to do as little damage as possible while prioritizing her and her team's survival, which is what Overwatch 1 Orisa did, but as I said, that design was already taken and perfected by Ramattra, which is also a design that raised the over-the-top defenses for actual offenses. An overly defensive character isn't bad per se, but it's also not good, and you can't let it be good. That's why her design has never worked before. Pacifism demands fortify. So instead, I took the damage out of Javelin Spin and gave her Halt, which already doesn't do damage, so 2 of her abilities reflect its defensive nature. And then made a compromise by giving her Energy Javelin as a skill shot designed to eliminate low health targets and take advantage of Halt. It's not perfect, but it shouldn't be, for her own sake. Oh, and this version is definitely not as good against Doomfist, which is unfortunately contradictory to her canon, but I think that's a sacrifice that needs to be made, seeing as Doomfist is a tank that's only countered by stuff that's inherently unfun or straight up bad, such as crowd control, heavy knockback, or invulnerabilities. Is this Orisa better for the overall health of the game? Yes, no invulnerabilities and less negative punishments are just a good thing, and her new abilities open up more ways for her to be balanced than to just move cooldowns around. She should be able to be balanced into a good character without it resulting in everybody pulling their hair out and wanting to uninstall for the season, and the design shouldn't be too hard to adapt to any format, since it has no properties that are broken by nature. At least, I don't think. But what do you think? Is this Orisa really better, or am I just lying to myself to go with the amount of time this video took to make? What changes would you make to Orisa's core design to make it better? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I really do believe Orisa fans deserve better, and if there's one thing you can take away from this video, is that it could be better if only the developers took the time to make it so.
I made you to be strong and brave. You still have a lot to learn. And you'll probably mess up sometimes. But I know you'll become the hero we need.
My name is Orisa. I will keep you safe. That is my primary function.
And that's it for this video. I was originally going to make a video exploring the good and bad design choices of Overwatch as a whole, but I quickly realized 2 things. 1, this development team has no clue what they're doing half the time and are too damn stubborn to roll back changes, and 2, Orisa perfectly exemplifies poor design. I kept circling around to the same 3 characters for examples when I was writing the script, with Orisa being the most reoccurring one. The other 2 are Kiriko and Brick, if you're curious. Add that to the fact that the last part of Season 9 was a horse meta again, and everywhere you looked people were suffering from TSHD, terminal stage horse disease, an illness characterized by a deep desire to eat glass and longing for the next balance pack to come, only for the release of Season 10 to make 0 changes to Orisa, and I decided to pivot into making a full Orisa video. Of course, it took so long that the Orisa nerfs eventually came, but unsurprisingly, they addressed nothing and just left her to die in a pit of molten core, so I felt even more compelled to see this through. This is my first attempt at making anything of the sort, but I do have more videos planned, such as the aforementioned one about the wider design problems in the game, as well as what makes a good character design in the first place. But I don't know when those will be ready, so until then, you can check out my Magic the Noah-inspired Google Slides game. It's exactly what it sounds like. I promise most of them are good, and I still plan on making more. They've just been delayed due to continuous scaling issues on my side. Until then, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss anything I make. If you didn't, I would like to politely ask for you to comment how I can make it better. And I'll see you on the next video.